Good afternoon, one and all. I'm going to do a talk this morning entitled Life, Death and Immortality. So let's just have a few moments to relax and be at peace within ourselves. Breathe out any tension that you may have. Just feel nice and relaxed. We've got a lovely sunset or sunrise behind us. You can just feel nice and peaceful like the Buddha in the image. Breathe out any tension. So, life, death and immortality. From the very first day we are born, we are faced with the problem of death. For many people, it is something that haunts them constantly. As we grow older, the problem becomes more immediate, and we either shut it out from our minds, as 99% of people in the West do, or if we are at all sensitive, we try our best to come to terms with the problem, as we realize that we cannot escape death's icy hand. As someone said, no one gets out of here alive. The Bhagavad Gita, though, tells us that we should not grieve over the inevitable. And so we are encouraged to try to conquer the seeming horrors of death and solve its mysteries. I hope that this talk will help to stimulate some thought and discussion on this subject, and that we can discover some interesting ideas together. So the first idea that we need to get into our minds is that life has a wider meaning than we tend to give to it. Under-education in the West gives us the idea that life only covers the period of time that the physical body is functional. When this period of activity ends, so does life, according to this idea. This is the rather limited and illogical conclusion that materialistic thought leads us to. Given the universality of life and its presence everywhere, is it logical to think that it ever ceases? W.Q. Judge, and one of the founders of the Theosophical Society in the early days, tells us of the ever living, and it is to this that we must bring our attention if we are to solve the mystery. Now, logic is a strange thing. Logic developed by the Western mind runs along limited lines and reaches conclusions based upon partial evidence. Spiritual intuition knows the truth of a thing, but cannot explain it. Therefore, the mystic will always lose an intellectual argument, even though he or she knows for sure that what they say is correct, whereas the intellectual only speculates. That is a strange paradox of modern life. People, whether scientists or educationalists, religious leaders or philosophers, boldly asserting what they don't really know, and the mass of people blindly accepting because they have neither the time nor the inclination to think for themselves. Meditation and devotion to the one life reveals to us that there is really no break in consciousness at any stage of our journey, and that life does not cease, but only manifests through different vehicles. Therefore, there is indeed only the ever living. Presence at the bed of someone who has just passed on gives us a feeling of relief and calmness, but then afterwards a feeling of loss overwhelms as other psychological elements and emotions come into play. H.P. Blavatsky, HPB, gives us some mantric insights into the whole subject of death. She says that death is ever a friend and deliverer. Ever a friend and deliverer. These few words are worthy of deep meditation. Death is not the morbid thing that we think. It is an opening into another world and a return to a state that is more natural to us and to relationships that may be deeper and more fulfilling. When we are released from the physical body, the cause of illimitable pain, as HPB calls it, we dwell for a while in an intermediate state of being before passing into Devachan, which means the place of the gods, where we are said to be rewarded for all our unmerited suffering. It needs to be understood that this state of being is even more vivid and real than the world we are in now, and relationships are even deeper and more meaningful. What is around us in this place, this Devachan, we create or draw to us, but we are nearer to the source, so everything is clearer. It is the consummation of our higher feelings and emotions. All that is unworthy of this state slowly decomposes on lower planes of being, and often fools the ordinary medium and those too much attached to the material view of things into thinking that this is the real person. I think we are often too much taken up in Theosophy and other spiritual traditions with the technicalities that we don't meditate on the real nature of Devachan. This state is almost certainly where Christians and other religions get their idea of heaven, but it is not a permanent state. In Theosophy, the human being is generally divided into 7 main principles. The reason for this is that we are nature's children, just like everything else in this manifested universe. 7 colours of the rainbow, 7 basic musical notes. And so this number gives the keynote to this planet. Other planets may be based upon different numbers. Some may be based on the number 5 or any other number. So these numbers are evident in nature, and HPB told us that the book of nature is the greatest book of all. In nature is the key to all the mysteries of life and death. But there is a deeper mystical view to all this, as put forward beautifully by Raghavan Iyer, who was a Theosophical member of the United Lodge of Theosophists for a long time. He says, the level of love determines the measure of joy. Joy flowing from the degree of love one is initially capable of generating acts as a stimulus to larger loves and greater joys that will eventually dissolve into the cosmic dance of Shiva, wherein all the elements are involved. This is enigmatic because it involves the mathematics of the soul and of the universe, the karma of nations and the whole of humanity. The moment one reaches out beyond one's own shadow, the personal self, turning towards the light that lighteth every man that cometh into the world, then there is joy flowing from the immortal soul in the realm of illimitable light. There is joy in the sure knowledge that though there is life and death, there is also immortality, which does not participate in what is called life and what is feared as death, but is greater than all the small cycles and little circles of time and space. There is joy in the awareness that there is limitlessness in the realm of cosmic ideation, eternal duration, and boundless space. This is the timeless teaching of divine wisdom, and it has always had urgency for the individual, as in the days of Jesus, when he asked, "Whom choose ye this day?" A critical, ultimate, irreversible choice is involved. Now, when the opportunities are great for the whole of the human race, something has begun which will become in time a mighty stream that will nourish the earth. It will reflect the hidden fire of the mysteries, known to those who have travelled far on the secret path that leads to the invisible summits of enlightenment. At the first portal of the path, there is the fateful inscription, "Abandon hope, all ye who enter here." Abandon hope for the petty personality. Abandon hope for ambition, pride, and selfish desire. Abandon hope, above all, for one's own salvation, if one would enter the path, which leads to a galaxy of gurus, mighty men of meditation, and lovers of all humanity, who are wholly dedicated to the sacred goal of universal enlightenment. They have said, "If you wish to know us, study our philosophy. If you wish to serve us, serve our humanity. If you take one step in our direction, we will take one step in yours." And that's from a magazine called Hermes, February 1978, by Raghavan Iyer, as I said. Now, HPB tells us that immortality is but one's unbroken consciousness. And this gives us a clue to how we can overcome the illusion of death. We must learn that there is really no such thing as death, as we understand it, in a fatalistic way. The best way to get some understanding of this is to look at nature and the cycles that run through it. Nature is so beautiful in its innocence and stirs in us some memory of the loveliness of our own soul, freed from the cloying effects of matter, and an identification with the course that shuts out our own light, the light that illumines our path and is our inspiration throughout our lives and our guide in dark times. But this has to become real to us, an awakening to what we really are in essence. The Voice of the Silence, translated by H.P. Blavatsky, tells us that the mind is the great slayer of the real, and that the disciple must slay the slayer. This, of course, is referring to that aspect of the mind that builds its own view of the world based upon information gathered from various sources, the media, education, and other people. That it draws conclusions from this basis. In other words, this aspect of the mind is fed on second-hand knowledge. It is known as the lunar mind, because like the moon, it reflects everything based on reflected knowledge, on second-hand knowledge. Unfortunately, our society is built upon this kind of information gathering. The internet has brought it to its most intense level, and although people praise the World Wide Web for its usefulness in accessing a variety of information, as regards the true wisdom that many of us seek, it can be another obstacle. Of course, it has many advantages. I mean, I use it a lot, and it's very useful in many ways, including the fact many advantages, including the fact that someone with ideas can spread them with much more effectiveness. Well, this can work either for good or for bad, as the internet, of course, is amoral. But generally, there is the idea prevalent in society that the accumulation of facts is a good thing and increases the level of humanity's intelligence. But information does not change a human being, does not make them any better, not even information of a spiritual nature, unless it is acted upon and made the basis of one's life. So the real knowledge that we seek is the solar knowledge, which is direct knowledge that gives us first-hand experience of who or what we really are, or conversely, who or what we are not. Most of modern humanity spend most of their lives living second-hand and very rarely touch their true natures. Many do momentarily when they listen to a beautiful piece of music, or look at the vistas of nature, or read some lovely poetry, or fall in love. And often we are moved to tears by these things. Is that because we are pining for that beauty that lives in us, just as it does in all things that are natural or come from the Spirit? And one of the best things that I've ever read is Plotinus's treatise on beauty, which has been very influential in my life and thinking. And I've mentioned it a few times in my talks. In this, Plotinus discusses that there is a beauty of symmetry and form that is recognizable to the soul of everyone. Also, there's a beauty of intellect that is clearly recognizable. Hence the fact that acts of heroism will also bring tears to our eyes. There's all a kind of pining for this world that we are all exiled from, a better world, a more beautiful world, a golden age. We also inwardly recognize and revere a soul who tries to live a spiritual life. HPB tells us that devotion is the only feeling in us that is natural. Devotion for those on a higher level of being than we are at the moment. All this does not give credence to the old adage, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. There is a kind of beauty that is related to the lower aspects of the mind, and that is very active in the modern world. This is manifest in modern art and music, and in politics and science, a soulless world. HPB again tells us that those ignorant of anything spiritual are called the living dead, because to become truly human is to develop the spiritual side of our nature. Unfortunately, we can easily see that the so-called living dead are prevalent in the arts and sciences in modern society. But also there are flashes of spirituality that shine through. Even in popular music, poetry and art that are nowadays ruled by the coarser emotions and thoughts. As throughout the ages, there are individuals and groups rebellious to this general influence. But the spiritual forces that watch over this earth have their incarnations in the most unusual places. So even in this age of Kali, this age of darkness, there are sparkles everywhere and always will be. The light will never completely go out, as long as there are people who are willing to let that light shine within them. So all of this brings into focus the fact that the real death comes about as the result of a surfeit of materialism, a quenching of the good, the true and the beautiful in us, and a life built upon second-hand ideas, thoughts and information. What we call death is merely the shedding of the physical form that has followed the way of the world and gone through the processes of birth, maturity, old age, and death, and then death. So we shed the gross body, the source of illimitable pain, as said, especially in our later years, and we dwell for a while in a shining form, surrounded by all that we consider beautiful and pure, unless we are so material that we only deserve dreamless sleep, or so evil that we create a nightmare world. Yet the same fact remains. In all of this, there is no break in consciousness. There is no death in the traditional sense, not the end that material culture has created, but the cyclic reality that nature expresses at every turn. Our real being is untouched by all of the illusions of the material universe and remains ever the calm watcher that stands sentinel at the gates of eternity. This true self has seen so much, seen the passing of the years and the many lives that are strung onto its golden thread like so many pearls. It has seen the rise and fall of so many civilizations, has witnessed the origin and end of continents. and yet can read the very heart of an individual and cherish every leaf that unfurls or flower that opens to drink the morning sun. And this is the real self, the genuine dimension to us that is the same in all things, the one consciousness in everything, the oneness of all living beings, the essence of all that is manifested, and the pale reflection of what is never revealed to the profane mind. It suffers in the illusions created by the mind that slays the real and robs us of the wonder of what we really are. This lesser vision brings into being a life that is stunted and unsatisfactory, and therefore also springing to life are all the negative emotions and ideas that breed pessimism, the keynote of modern life. If we only saw rightly through the fragmented delusions of our lives, brought about by seeing through a glass darkly, we would just see one tranquil, unchanging reality, sung about in countless poems and expressed in a myriad sacred writings and discourses. You see, life, death, and immortality are merely concepts. The Zen Buddhists will say that nothing is sacred or profane, because sacredness and profanity are human inventions of this slayer mind that we have been discussing. The truth of what we are is natural as breathing. It is not adorned with the trappings of religious ceremony or doctrine, but is as clear and ordinary as the sky. It is what we are when we take away the misunderstandings of our true nature that brings the world we live in into being. Once we understand, the world as we know it changes, and we live as we truly are, able, if we so choose, to return to this realm of shadows to help to dispel the illusions of others, as so many of the great world teachers have done. So this is the choice of the Bodhisattva in the Buddhist teaching, to return to help humanity. But it's a choice. Whether we choose one or the other, they both have merit, as we are told. So we are only separated by the misunderstandings we have of our true nature. The more we understand who and what we are, the more we come together. And that is the key. The reason why we constantly study and meditate on things spiritual, to break down self-created walls and to build bridges instead. Compassion comes from an increased feeling of solidarity with our fellow human beings and an empathy with their sufferings based upon our own experiences of being human. That is why we suffer. And to suffer is often to learn and grow. If we treat it positively as a way to understand what others are going through. But we also need to learn how to conquer suffering so that we can help others to do the same. It is all about getting a positive attitude to life and using the many experiences we garner to help us towards an awareness of reality. It is also about flowering forth as truly human beings and learning how to love again. For too long have we accepted the rind instead of the fruit, and so society has substituted shallow emotions for the real thing. It even reflects in popular music and poetry, which is becoming poorer in spirit as time moves on. We are fast losing the ability to relate to each other deeply and meaningfully. We live in the transitory and therefore become victims of time, whereas in reality, we are timeless beings. We are immortal in our inner essence. Yet the world more and more spawns the soulless in all aspects of life, in art, poetry, music, etc. The sense of soul beauty is lost. A society more and more prides itself upon a lack of spirituality and therefore creates its own Frankenstein's monster that turns and rends it. Yes, we have forgotten how to love, mistaking sensuality and over-emotionalism for this feeling. And both of these lead to pain and oblivion in the end. They're not full of the life-giving waters of immortality and the sense of oneness that must become our life's meditation. Also, we do not cultivate the attitude of mind encouraged by the Buddha and Jesus to return good for evil, love for hatred. We do not have that clarity of vision that sees that hatred only propagates hatred and anger. We have situations now in certain races and religious beliefs where people are inflicting suffering upon others in revenge for suffering inflicted upon themselves. But anyone with any sensitivity would realize that the horrors that they have been through and not want anyone to go through the same. To want someone else to suffer the same as they have is not just insensitive, but inhuman and cruel. And yet this is the attitude prevalent at the moment in certain religions and ways of belief, individually and on a wider scale. An eye for an eye is an attitude that was refuted by Jesus in favor of love your enemies and bless those that curse you. But how many in the history of humanity have had the strength to live those words of Jesus? The few that have stand out like beacon lights in the darkness of this age. So to look at life and death as separate is an illusion. And this is to be avoided. To be immortal, we need to rest in the Tao, or Krishna, or Christ, or Buddha, or whatever name we give to the absolute, or the void, or to our understanding or vision of the spiritual part of our nature, or the higher self. All of these are terms or concepts devised by the lower mind to facilitate an understanding of things that cannot be understood. The whole value of the spiritual life is in the practice, the living. This is what makes it real. This is what makes it impact on our lives. She said that the Tao is not sentimental, that we should fix our sight on the light that is free from all affection. This is because sentimentality alone is a human concept, another creation of the Slayer mind, and does not exist in nature. The fact that the Tao is so healing and compassionate and cooling to the mind is due to the fact that its effectiveness is in a state beyond human conceptions, emotions, and thoughts. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is said to be the Lord, the witness, the resting place, the asylum, and the friend. And this gives us the key to coping with life, even in its worst phases. We do have an asylum and an oasis in life's desert. This is the talisman, and in reality, the saviour. It is this omnipresent, boundless, and immutable principle that cannot be speculated upon, as the human intellect could only dwarf it. And that is the only ideal worth striving for. But even attaching the name of an ideal to it is just another concept, and speculation upon it is fruitless. It is nothing and yet everything at one and the same time. So there's a conundrum. So it is the essence of all the longings that we have. Meditation in Theosophical writings is described as the inexpressible yearning of the inner man or woman to go out towards the infinite. And so all our earthly yearnings are pale reflections of this one ultimate yearning to return to what we really are or are not. So to make life meaningful, we have to try to make it spontaneous and beautiful, to make living an art in the true sense of the word. We tend to separate art from our living, going to museums and art galleries, music concerts and theatres, which are all fine and can be brimming with inspiration and ideas. But can we not all, as spiritual beings, denizens of eternity, see our lives as a work of art? Can we not listen to our own music, find ourselves in the midst of our own drama and the drama of the planet and the universe? The whole world is an art gallery. Once when I was on a train, I imagined the window frames were picture frames, and I watched the ever-changing art exhibition. It's also very important to look at our fellow human beings with respect as spiritual creatures, and to think of ways to relate to others respectfully and lovingly, taking time to think of ways to assist in their civilization by the words and ideas that we present to them, or the thoughts that we allow to impinge on their consciousness. There's so much of disrespect in the world, regard for inanimate objects such as money, cars, houses, etc. Programs about on TV about decorating houses or renovating them or buying things. Never was selfishness so well housed. Of course, we need these things, but we mustn't be swallowed up by them. Also, people are injured or killed for the sake of money. Just piles of paper and junk metal that can't buy anything of any real value. The Tao Te Ching tells us that if we make material goods seem precious, we invite trouble. If we promote the idea that we are immortal in our physical form, then we will spend our lives trying to propitiate the material body, trying to make it beautiful and happy, working to make our transitory lives seem permanent, our few brief years on this planet eternal. This is what people do. They give total attention to the physical body and the physical life, which is only very short in this particular personality. So we need to face the fact of death, something that we struggle to shut out from our minds. Instead of making friends with it, realizing that it is the culmination of our brief stay in the world. Rabindranath Tagore, in some of his poems, made friends with the great leveller, looked upon it as something beautiful, and tried to show that when we reach the stage we call death, that in fact we will awaken to deeper experiences of life. That gives us a lot of promise, a lot of hope. And this is another key fact, coming to terms with what we regard as life and death, which is a dichotomy in our minds that stains the ever-living. Society has trained us in the idea and thought that we are immortal in our ordinary lives. As said, we live as though we are, shutting out any concepts or ideas connected with the fact that we may one day pass from this world. We do not see the whole story, or at least a larger part of it, because no one sees the whole story, I suppose. We are not aware of this wonderful pilgrimage that we are on with so many other shining souls. While there are certainly times in our lives that are not happy, we have to face our own demons and the collective demons of society. We have to say goodbye to those we love and to well-cherished beliefs. Change is often our worst enemy, but is usually the herald of something more wonderful and inspiring. What is that old saying? There are no full stops, only commas. HBB says, woe to those that live without change. She says that this is because it is only through change that we grow. Without change and suffering that may accompany it, we stagnate. Life is beautiful, really, if we can touch the spiritual side of ourselves and of others. But this touching sets the wheels in motion, brings about the change, excites the regeneration that is to transform us into these denizens of eternity. And change is almost always painful, letting go of cherished beliefs, of relationships that are inimical to this change. This can bring about a period of sadness, the dark night of the soul. But at the same time, all this is a precursor to the dawn of a beautiful day, when the radiance of the spiritual sun will illumine our hearts and give us a deeper vision of the world and those around us, and reveal to us a wondrous view of nature, free from the veils that the human mind creates. For what we refer to as spiritual progress is simply the widening of our inner vision, letting in more and more of the light of the true sun, the true self, so that slowly and surely a new world becomes visible to us as the light increases, more and more will then come into focus. It is like being on the top of a mountain just before the dawn. As the sun rises above the peaks, it sheds its light into the valleys. What were just areas of blackness now are regions of lush vegetation, rivers and forests. So it is with our spiritual sight. Areas of darkness disappear. True knowledge dispels the darkness of ignorance, and we become aware that we move and have our being in the ever-living, and that it was the slayer mind that created all our doubts and fears based upon a misunderstanding of our true nature. As said before, it is this misunderstanding that keeps us apart. The more we understand, the more we come together. The whole of the universe exists because of this misunderstanding. If we truly understand, there will be no more manifested universe for us. We would know immortality. So it's really returning to the natural, to being natural, to working along with nature, reading the book of nature, in fact. If we watch the development of a seed into a flower, we can see the same in everything, from the flower to the universe itself. And we can see that everything that is manifest has to go through the processes I mentioned earlier: birth, maturity, old age, and death. But if we continue to follow nature, we can also see clearly the presence of regeneration or rebirth. The tree bursts forth into blossom and leaf every spring. Day follows night, and the seasons go round and round. In fact, if we think deeply, we can see the cyclic law running through everything in the world and the universe. And the spiritual literature of the world mentions vast periods of cyclic time. Theosophy goes into detail about all of this, and we can reason that if we are part of this cyclic law and not divorced from it as materialistic science and dogmatic religion would have us believe, then reincarnation becomes a logical conclusion. And it is the one life theory that does not make any sense. It goes against natural law. But society in general accepts the conclusions of scientists and religious leaders built upon misconceptions due to a failure to use common sense and to look deeply into the heart of Mother Nature, who will always reveal her secrets to the earnest student. Our divorce from nature has many devastating effects on many levels, as well as the physical. It affects us mentally and morally. Nature should be our guideline, and there's a danger because of our alienation from her. We accept things that are opposed to the workings of nature and are the products of this slayer mind. It is a matter of having the sense to give up the lower to accept the higher, to realize that the lower emotions and feelings are preventing us from reaching our full potential. We accept the rind instead of the fruit, as said. We go for lust instead of love, and therefore miss out on so many wonderful insights and experiences and the ability to communicate with our fellow creatures on a higher and deeper level, motivated by a love that most of us can only dream of at our present stage, which is there waiting for us if we only open up to what is real and try to read this book of nature. So to sum up and go through certain points again, we need to begin to see ourselves and others as truly human beings instead of animal beings. It is this animalistic view of our brothers and sisters that created most of the problems in the world. Materialistic science has a lot to answer for, hypnotizing us into believing that we are just lumps of flesh and bone and protoplasm, therefore opening the door to crimes and murders committed for greed and money or power or jealousy or race, based on the fact that we do not have respect for each other as spiritual beings and do not realize that only one spirit animates everything. Everything is one. We cannot be not separate ourselves from anyone or anything else. There's only life, the ever living. There's no death. that is just an illusion, another creation of materialistic science and dogmatic religion. Fortunately, there are trends in both science and religion away from materialism and dogmatism. So we have to be hopeful. So we shut ourselves off from so much beauty and light and depth of feeling. There's so many people in the world we can see have lost touch with their souls, who are to all intents and purposes soulless. Not just a lad or girl who stones ambulance crews and fire crews, takes drugs and mugs others for money, offer pleasure to film on their mobile phones and put on YouTube, but also the businessman who cares nothing for nothing but money, or the family that thinks only of their new car or new house. These have all lost touch with their souls, with the things that really matter. They are living as if they were on this planet for eternity, or instead of for just a few short decades. Did not Jesus tell us not to store treasures on earth where moth and rust corrupt, but that we should store our treasures in heaven where moth and rust do not corrupt? In other words, we need to dive deep into our souls and find those things that really, really matter, that we can take with us beyond this short life. Spiritual knowledge, a deepening relationship with our fellow human beings and other creatures on this planet, the real meaning of love. For too long we've been given stones when we ask for bread. It is time that we awoke and saw the reality. Religions, philosophical systems are not the reality. They are pointers, but they can become our downfall if we get lost in them, and can actually poison our soul if they are allowed to consume us. No, we must move to an experiential awareness of our true nature and our oneness with all things. Only experience counts in the end, and intellectual jugglery is fruitless and pointless, ultimately. Just more facts to add to the bonfire of facts we have already. The internet has ensured that the slayer mind has its sacrifice, and the avalanche of information covers the realm of Shambhala, where true wisdom resides. Unless we can realize this and see that more and more people are becoming automatons, slaves to the written word and the second-hand image, we'll surely lose sight of our purpose and find ourselves mere puppets in the hands of those who are devoid of any kind of altruistic or humanitarian purposes. The words of the great teachers like Jesus, Buddha, and Krishna will become fainter and fainter and only receive a nodding acceptance. Their images and teachings will become just one more addition to our collection of baubles in the busy marketplace of life, and we will be unable to find any depths to our lives and relationships. This is not too hard a prophecy to make, as it can clearly be seen in progress and in the world around us. Of course, there are many, many really good people in the world and many good movements, and the internet promotes a lot of these good movements. So as I said before, it isn't a moral thing, it has a dual purpose. I mean, obviously I use the internet and I like it very much. I like the social media, Facebook and all those things. I use all of those and I find them incredibly useful. But, you know, it's a double-edged sword like everything else. And all the people I talk about who living ordinary lives, they're not bad people, of course. They're not necessarily soulless. Many of them are good people trying to live good lives. We must remember that. And never be, like Pythagoras said, take heart, for the race of man is divine. Must remember that. And never despair of humanity under any circumstance. But it is a good thing that the Theosophical movement and many other movements are active in the world today and giving individuals and groups the chance to discover at least some of the truth and also shine a light into the darkness of this Kali Yuga, this dark age. The inestimable importance of this work cannot be gauged. If we can grasp just some of this value, then we would work on despite everything at our own pace and our own level to help to bring about the universal brother-sisterhood of humanity that we sorely need and can never be reached by any political or social means, but only by realizing soul solidarity and the fact that there is only one life in everything, and certainly no such thing as death. Thank you. So a few moments of quiet again. Just breathe out any tension, like the Buddha at the back there. A nice enigmatic smile on his face, like the Mona Lisa. Thank you very much. Om Shanti, 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 peace, 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 peace on earth and goodwill to all beings.